My name is Carlos Gomez. I'm a Spanish teacher and co-teacher leader for our school's global focus and work with the International Studies Schools Network. On behalf of our principal, Mr. Waltz, our faculty members, and our students here at Deering, welcome to everybody. As you know, Deering High School is one of the most diverse schools north of Boston, perhaps the most diverse. Our students come from over 50 countries and speak more than 30 home languages. We are a community of learners that strives to be college and career ready and globally competent. Over the past 3 years, we have worked closely with the University of Maine School of Law and the Justice for Women Lecture Series. We've learned much, we've contributed much, and we've been inspired to action by our annual speakers. Today's guest has several engagements around Maine this week to speak about food insecurity. She will visit the Mitchell Institute, the Good Shepherd Food Bank, Bates College, as well as other stops here in Maine, culminating with a keynote address on Thursday night at 7 p.m. at the University of Southern Maine's Hannaford Hall here in Portland. We here at Deering are honored with her visit. Today's program, after my introductions here, we will have some words by Ms. Schmidt to talk a little bit about our global focus, some words by Salim to introduce our speaker, a conversation with Delanta Musunerva, a junior, and our guest speaker. The four of them will be speaking for about half an hour, 40 minutes. We'll open it up to some questions and answers, and we'll have Mayor Strimling conclude this morning's event. Before we start, some brief thank yous to Kathy Lee of Lee International for your tireless effort to endow the Justice for Women lecture program while addressing climate change on your free time. We are very inspired by your work, Kathy. Dean Danielle Conway of the School of Law, who is inspiring global citizenship and deeper community connections through the study of law here in Maine. Amy Holland and the World Affairs Council for connecting schools with the world through a dynamic speakers series and an annual World Quest competition, which we participated in the last few years. I believe there's some members from CIEE, a wonderful partner who is giving our Deering students, as well as thousands of other students around the country and the world, opportunities to investigate the world and recognize perspectives. There are several members from the Portland Public Schools, including our board member, Marnie Marioni, Kim Brandt, and Becky Foley, and I think Superintendent Crocker will join us, hopefully. Thank you for modeling global citizenship and leadership and supporting the work at our school. Katie Brown of the Locker Project and Mrs. Scales' JMG classes for founding and maintaining our own Ramley Market, which seeks to address the food and clothing needs of our own Deering students and families here at Deering. If you would like to support or access the Ramley Market, please see one of our guidance counselors, social workers, or nurse. We also have in the audience today Dale Carlson, the director of the Million Meals Maine. With Dale's help, last Friday, our Take Action Day at Deering brought together more than 1,500 volunteers, including students, neighbors, community organizations, houses of worship, and individuals who packed more than 264,000 meals in one day. Big round of applause. Though we know meal packing is not the solution to food insecurity, and today we hope to learn more about promising ecological, scientific, political, and economic solutions, we hope to be able to at least meet some of the basic and immediate needs of the most food insecure among us. So thank you, Mr. Carlson, for your work. To introduce my colleague Sarah Schmidt. She is an English language arts teacher here at Deering and has been with the Portland Public Schools for more than 15 years. She is a colleague of mine, co-teacher leader in our global focus and work with the International Studies Schools Network. She is currently working on creating a global leadership certificate and endorsement for our students. And just a reminder to please turn off your cell phones and give our undivided attention to our speakers this morning. Thank you, Deering.
Google Meet. Very briefly, again, thank you to everybody who came out today to join us. You stole some of my thunder, Carlos. I was going to recognize our guests. Just a quick reminder about some of the work we've done in the past 3 years. As a member of the ISSN, the International Study Schools Network, past 3 years we've embraced a global perspective at Deering. And as part of that, we've had a theme each year to embrace global issues across the disciplines. We had a theme of water and water scarcity the first year. Second year was hunger and poverty. And this year we're looking at global solutions. And I think today's speaker will have a lot to say about global solutions when it comes to climate, agriculture, and food insecurity. I'd like to introduce our two hosts, I guess we would call them. Everybody knows Salim, our senior representative, and our junior, Dilanta Musanura. Both will be interviewing our esteemed guest, and Salim will introduce her to you. Thank you very much.
I would like to humbly introduce to you Dr. Lindiwe Majele Sibanda, a passionate woman with a history full of accomplishments and leadership. But before I do that, I would like to talk a little bit about her and her life. Dr. Sibanda was born in Zimbabwe with a passionate mother who always woke up in the morning to work on her 1-acre farm. She used to wake her children up and pray with them. Dr. Sibanda's mother prayed that her children would grow up to be farmers and that they would not only feed their children and family, but feed the whole of Zimbabwe. Dr. Sibanda grew up to become an amazing leader with tons of experience on agriculture, food insecurity, and much more. She has traveled all around the world, from Zimbabwe to Egypt, England, and many more places. Dr. Sibanda has over 20 years of transdisciplinary experience in rural development, public sector reforms, and private sector management. Since 2004, she has held the position of Chief Executive Officer and Head of Mission of Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resources Policy Analysis Network, which stands for FENARPAN. And she coordinates her research and advocacy programs at Making Africa a Food and Nutrition Secure Region. Not only is she the head of the FENARPAN organization, but she's also leading a multi-country research on how to improve nutrition outcomes by making particular investments and asking the question, what can agriculture do for nutrition? In the recent years, Dr. Sibanda was a part of the Global Development Advisory Panel, which are some of the most influential thinkers and preeminent development experts. She has received multiple awards in recognition of her great effort into reforming the food system and making our world more food secure. In 2013, she was recognized as one of the 7 women working to change the food system in honor of International Women's Day by the Food Think Tank. She was also given the Yara 2013 Laureate Award, which awarded and recognized her successful entrepreneurship with agricultural works. Now, I can go on and on talking about how accomplished this woman is, but I would like to say thank you so much for coming to our school and for giving us some of your time. Now, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Sibanda.
Okay, hi. So just to start off, I know Salim already mentioned that you are the CEO and head of mission of the Food, Agricultural, Natural Resource Policy Analysis Network, but could you please speak more on what that work consists of and what you do around the world?
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I hope I'll warm up and be young and vibrant like all of you. Food, Agriculture, Natural Resources Policy Analysis Network. We've been called Frying Pan. It's Fanapan. We are not going to change that name because it's complex. That way it sticks. But our business is to make sure that policies for food security are informed through research and that policymakers are held accountable for the policy decisions they make, because it's the people that implement policies that should be at the center of deciding what's best for them. But in most cases, almost always, that decision is made by government, and we are saying as a network, government should be informed by those most affected by policies. And who are those people? They are the farmers who feed the world, who produce the food. They are private sector who are responsible for moving commodities from the farm, processing, value adding, distributing both nationally, regionally, and globally. But also the researchers who are responsible for documenting the evidence of what works, what doesn't work, and sharing the success and failures so that we can be better citizens that are responsible and accountable. And in this era of sustainable development goals, accountability is not just about economics, it's about social well-being, and it's about feeding the environment so that we leave this world a better place than we found it. So my network is responsible for undertaking research, generating evidence that makes sure that our policies for food security and nutrition security are evidence-based.
Let's hold the applause till the end.
Yes, thank you. So to kind of continue on to that, as you've already mentioned, food insecurity. So what are some of the barriers that people encounter to accessing affordable and nutritious food?
What are some of the barriers? A lot. I think for me, the saddest thing is that for Africa in particular, the very people who are mandated, are willing, and are in the business of feeding us are the ones who are the most hungry. And why is that so? It's because we have not modernized our agriculture. And when I talk about modernization of agriculture, it's because we have been using the same land without feeding this land so that the soil fertility issues are addressed. We've been mining the land, whereby the very land that was referred to in the introduction, the grandmother, my grandmother had a 1 acre plot. Close to 60 years later, my cousin, who's taken over the farm, is working on the same land, using the same type of seeds that my grandmother used, and using the same type and amount of fertilizer, because that's what he's always known, that's what he can afford. And what we are saying is, nobody's been there to just do a simple analysis of the soil, to analyze how much has been taken out and how much has to be replenished, because the starting point for any agriculture is the soil. Now, when we talk about modernization, we're talking about what is the available technology that can improve productivity. If you look at our yields currently, and our main staple for the region where I come from, Southern Africa, Zimbabwe, is corn. And if you ask most Zimbabweans, when do you go to plant? When is the planting season? There's a magical figure of 11 November. That's the time we till the land and you're ready with your seed and your fertilizer. But the seasons have shifted, and we have not received early warning signals or information that allows us to adapt to climate change, to adapt to the changed seasons. Now, all that requires new knowledge, which has to be researched on, it has to be documented, and it has to be publicized. But it also requires policies that will make these technologies affordable, accessible, And unfortunately, the farmers have continued in their traditional ways. And what we are finding is that not only are the yields low, the harvests are contaminated because of poor storage. We experience up to 40% loss after harvest. Imagine when your global average for yield is only 10% of what people in developed countries are harvesting. And then when you store it because of poor storage facilities, you are losing 40% of what you put in the granaries, either through rodents that attack or just infestation, weather, decay that makes the product unusable. And all that requires technology, knowledge, but a conducive policy environment that will make better quality seed, affordable, accessible, but also technologies that improve productivity. So those are the challenges. Our farmers are going hungry and they're not accessing available technologies because of poor policies.
Thank you. To follow up on that, I kind of want to have a question similar to that. Just for the audience, I would like to ask you to explain, like, what does food insecurity look like in the areas that you work in?
I'll turn that back to you. What is the face of food insecurity in Maine? When I grew up, we almost knew for sure that this was a poor household and they go with just one meal a day. When my grandparents needed extra labor, we always knew that those poor households would avail their services to come and work for food, and they would benefit. And that was a social safety net that protected the poor. In the traditional village, there would be the head of the village who always made sure that there was a designated area where the community came in collectively to donate their seed, to grow crops, which then would be distributed to the local poor. Now, what did those people look like? In most cases, they'll be wearing clothes that are tattered and torn. They will not be able to afford washing powder for their clothes, and they will not be able to go to school. The government policy improved. We had access to free education. I'm a product of public education. But then, with changes in governments, nowadays, if you really want an educated child, you have to get them to a private school. What is the face of poverty is when you cannot afford, first of all, the quantity that you need to meet your health requirements, but most important, the nutritional quality. And to me, that's the scariest thing. It's the hidden hunger, whereby the most fashionable thing, unfortunately for us now in Africa, is to go for fast foods because people cannot afford the locally grown foods. They are not easily available and easily processed because of the high energy requirements. As a result, we're facing a situation where 1 in 3 children are malnourished. And when I talk about malnourishment, I'm talking about poor development of their brains because they have not been able to get the right nutrients at a critical time of growth. And this is the first 1,000 days when they are within their mother's tummies, in utero, and in the first 5 years of life. And that, to me, is the scariest face of hunger. It's the hidden hunger that we need to talk more about because it's not visible to the naked eye, and yet there is permanent damage. If nothing is done, 30 years down the line, we have a population where 1 in 3 people have dwarfed minds. Can you imagine the leadership, intellectual engagement, and just productivity of a country where people have not been adequately developed because of poor nutrition? And that's the challenge that we need to be addressing globally.
So to kind of continue on with kind of where Salim was going with this, what are some of the solutions that you found through your research that work in solving food insecurity?
I think the fundamentals have to be in place. Why are people not accessing technologies when so much research has been done? the number one enemy to development is poverty. You're poor because of your human capacity as a household. You have not invested in accessing technologies because you just don't know. So we call ignorance poverty, because you just don't know where to get help and you don't know what will lift you out of poverty. And it's good that when we've evolved from the Millennium Development Goals, which were really talking about the developing countries against the developed, and poverty was the number one goal, elevating the agenda to the Sustainable Development Goals, number one goal is still eradication of poverty. And I believe we really need to granulate the poverty into its different components. There's the human assets, where it's important what is happening now. You're getting education. And once you have education, you can read up about what makes success. You can set up your own goals and you can go out and try and attain those goals. But imagine if you can't read or write. Imagine if you cannot monetize your education and that you can get a good job and earn an income. It means the only profession that you will ever have access to is menial jobs that have a minimum income that may not meet your needs. And currently, public services are deteriorating. We no longer have access to free education, free health. And you find for poor households, 80% of their income goes towards food and health. And can you imagine, there's nothing else left for anything else. So those are the challenges. But then you also look at accumulation of physical assets. In an agriculture farming community, it's the livestock that becomes the reservoir for the extra income, because that then becomes food supply, but also a bank that can then be disposed of when you want to get income. So when we are talking development, number one enemy to development is eradicate poverty and make sure you build an asset base that can cushion you, first and foremost, to meet your fundamental needs. Food, housing, water and sanitation leads to good health. That's what we need to deal with as the fundamentals. And that's where government policy is key. And we want to make sure the policies that are in place are addressing those fundamentals.
To kind of go off of that, as far as poverty, so how do we help these people that are in such a poor environment, kind of help them, bring them out of that situation so that they have the ability to feed themselves?
How do you help? I think the first thing that we need is to accept and appreciate that no one wants to be poor, and that everybody wants to get out of that vicious poverty cycle. When I grew up, one thing my mom and my parents drummed into my head was that school first, education, that's the pathway, that's the ladder that you need to climb to get out of poverty. And you're privileged because you have that. And the issue is, you now can set your goals in terms of, you've got mentors, you've got your teachers, but more important, you can read and write. You can travel the world in your own mind and pick your role models, your mentors, and say, I want to be this, and work hard to get there. But imagine in a world where getting to school is a challenge, getting quality education is a challenge. Can you imagine looking for mentors and you cannot really benchmark yourself? So I think for me, the number one is education is key in terms of lifting people out of poverty. But the second thing is good leadership. I think we're not holding our leaders accountable enough, because one thing is, once you know what is good for you, and once you can pick success stories, you can then walk up to the leadership and say, why aren't we getting to be like country X? Why is it that we're stifled in terms of development? But if you cannot have that sort of dialogue because you know what is good for you, you will always be a breadbasket case where you are receiving what you're told is good for you. So one of the things that we do in my network is sharing success stories, making knowledge available, and then creating platforms for dialogue. It's no point just protesting and speaking out of passion. You need to generate the evidence of how did country X get to be a successful country? What policies do they have in place? What resources have they utilized to make sure that the population benefits? And how do you create a better world for everybody? And it's all about being good citizens and being good custodians for the resources that we have. And I think if we get good leadership and good citizenry that holds leaders to account using evidence, we are on the right path for success. But also, it's also about sharing our failures. And I've always said one of my wishes is to have a failure website where if you want to do right, you can check out what are the wrongs that have happened that have led to where some countries are. And unfortunately, we don't document enough of our failures. We all want to walk through the failure path before we succeed.
In a recent interview, you mentioned that you wanted to believe that some of the challenges in Africa could be similar to that of what Maine encounters. Could you elaborate on what you thought or know what those challenges are between Maine and Africa?
It's good you're not asking me what my failures are. What are the challenges that we face? I think I'm touching on them by talking about visionary leadership. But I think let's start from the fundamentals. I think the sad thing that is happening now is that we have become good as Africans in growing what we don't eat and eating what we don't produce. If you look at the trade bill for a country like Nigeria, which is the most populous country in Africa, it's rice. And then you say, but why can't you produce the rice? And the farmers will tell you that it's cheaper to bring it in than to produce. And what that is saying is that the policies are not right. And why are the policies not appropriately developed? It's because for a long time, Nigeria depended on oil. It's an oil-producing country, and if we put all our energy into producing the oil, exporting it, we will make money and we can buy anything, everything we want. But the 2007-2008 food crisis, which was worldwide, meant all the countries were closing their borders and saying, we're not exporting anything, we're not selling, our first priority is to feed our own countries. That was a wake-up call for countries that had not developed their agriculture. There's no one developed country that has gotten where it is without, first of all, addressing the fundamentals, and that's agriculture. That's why we talk about food security. We talk about food being a security issue, because an angry man is the most dangerous man. A hungry man is worse than angry, because they will just do anything to get that food. So I think the 2007-8 food crisis was a wake-up call that let's invest in our agriculture. For us in Africa, our government had already made a commitment to put at least 10% of their national budget into financing agriculture. We are struggling. Only 10 countries have achieved that target. That just shows we have a lot of work to do. So addressing food insecurity, get the fundamentals right. Get finance to address the fundamentals. Starts with the soil, then the technology, then the training for farmers to improve their skills so that they can improve productivity. But the number one challenge now is climate change. Unless our agriculture is climate smart, all the research we've done, all the seeds, the new seed varieties we are putting into the market may be irrelevant because they will not cope with the excess flood, they will not cope with the dry season, and we may have to research into new crops. that are relevant to the changed environment, and all this will require a refocus into the way we do our agriculture. So we need to conserve the water, we need to improve our soil fertility, and we need to invest in irrigation. Currently, only 4% of African agriculture is under irrigated lands. The rest is rain-fed agriculture. This, for most of Africa, from Southern Africa up to Ethiopia, is currently the worst year in the past 20 years in terms of drought. So there will be disaster. There are a lot of empty bowls looking for help because we've not been able to plant. That means there will be no harvest, and in a drought year, we need help. Yet, if we were irrigating our pastures, we would be able to harvest. Small harvest, but better than zero harvest.
To kind of just elaborate on what you just said, you mentioned climate smart agriculture. Could you speak on what that is exactly?
Yeah, when we talk about climate smart agriculture, people say, what's suddenly smart about agriculture? I think the challenge is that we are already living in a changed climate. We passed 1 degree warmer than what it was 100 years ago. And if we continue with business as usual and reach the 2 degree mark, it's going to be disaster. Now, what is the urgent call? We've got to adapt to the changed climate. And for farmers in Africa, where agriculture is the backbone of the economy for almost 80% of the countries, we are saying invest in smart ways of doing agriculture. You can not afford to be practicing rain-fed agriculture where you are dependent on rain. So invest in irrigation. That's number one, adaptation. Number two, try and locate the right varieties of seed and the right crops suitable to the environment you are in. You cannot go on with what my grandmother planted and say this is what we've always produced. Maybe it's time to move on from corn to sorghum because it's gotten drier, and in some areas there are more floods, so it means you may have to graduate from corn to rice, but all that requires research. But the other message that we are pushing in climate smart agriculture is mitigation. The biggest fight that we've had when we discuss in the annual climate change negotiations under the UN is that Africa is saying those who caused the damage must pay for the damage, and that those who cause the damage are the developed countries like the United States of America. And we're saying if the developing countries need to adopt new technologies, why should they pay? Somebody's got to pay that bill because they caused the damage, and that's why we now have climate change. But the good thing with the Sustainable Development Goals now is that we are saying we are in it together. Let the countries that want to develop do so in a smart way. Let them be responsible and adopt technologies that will reduce emissions from the practices, the agriculture they do. So instead of causing more damage, let's avail technologies that will mitigate climate change. Grow more in a responsible way and reduce more the emissions. That's mitigation. So adaptation, adapt to the already changed climate. Mitigation, grow more with less damage. The other thing that we're pushing is resilience. We're saying we're dealing with the environment. We want to make sure our ecosystem, both human systems, the land, the water, are resilient and they can absorb all the pressures that we are subjecting them to. So we're talking climate smart agriculture, we're talking adaptation, mitigation, and resilience of the environment. And we're saying that way we are all responsible citizens globally. Let those who cause the damage also adapt, mitigate, and improve resilience. And those who are catching up in development also be responsible citizens. That way we don't reach the 2 degrees increase that we are all scared of, because that will be disaster. So for agriculture, it's even more important, because if we just use fertilizer, contaminate the waterways, we increase emissions, that means we're going to reach 2 degrees even faster. So we're saying slow down, use science to inform you what technologies to adopt. That will help you adapt to environment and mitigate the emissions.
So I understand that your program is partnered with 17 countries that are working on agriculture reform programs. And you stated that most of them no longer can afford programs like the one that fed you as a child. Can you speak more on that experience?
All right. I think for me, when I think of my childhood, the best moments were, first of all, in the village with my grandmother. I went to school in the city, Bulawayo. And without fail, my dad would take us to see his mom in the village, which was a 2-hour drive. And he had an open truck. And can you imagine 12 children all loaded at the back for this 2-hour drive? We loved it. We are not 12 in my family, we are just 5. But because my dad had this truck, we would go and collect all the children from his sisters, his cousins, and fill the truck and get there. Now I realize it was my dad's clever way of us providing labor to my grandmother. So without fail, we'll get home. And the best part is my grandmother would be so excited she would slaughter a goat. We never had refrigeration, so once that goat is slaughtered, she would cut it into nice long pieces of dried meat, half of which we took back to the city when we went back. But we made sure that for every meal, there was the traditional maize meal, which we ate in a group, girls alone, boys alone. So she was smart in that we were all fed according to our physiological conditions, girls, boys, mothers, fathers, according to age. And in her 1-acre plot, there was an orchard for fruits. You didn't have to get permission to go and pull a tree, guava, mangoes off the tree and just eat any time. So there was all that diversity. The onion, the tomatoes were all from her vegetable patch. Nowadays, my cousin who's on the land, it's all just corn. So what that means is that when he grows this corn, which fails every second year because there's a drought or some other disaster, the yields have gone down because he's using the same soil. He's depending on us who are in town to send remittances. Now, unfortunately, we are moving slowly away from this nucleus family where you could afford to live with everybody and feed them because things have become expensive. But what that is doing is that he is now on the pauper's welfare list because he's only producing corn because that's the major commodity that has a market. If he doesn't harvest enough, it means he doesn't have enough money to send his children to school or to buy the extra food that goes with the corn meal. So those are the challenges. But when I went to school in the city, not only did I bring food from my grandmother's patch that would carry us through the 3 months of school term, we were lucky to have a mug of milk. Now, my friends tell me I was always a big giant in the class, so I would always be the big bowl to be serving the milk, and then what that meant is there was a tablespoon of cereal that was given to the school prefects. So you two asking the questions will get the double portion. But the beauty with that is that you would have this mug of milk for every child, every break time, school break time, that we all enjoyed. And this was pro-neutral that we didn't afford in most of our households. It was a luxury, and it wasn't part of the traditional mealtime. But now I know it was fortified food, just like the foods you were packing, which had all the vitamins, all the minerals, and we got that for all 7 years of primary education. Now it doesn't happen because of poverty, but also because of the policies that have changed. Schools are no longer mandated to provide school feeding. And that is sad, because maybe that's why we end up being the museum for stunting, with 1 in 3 children in Africa being below the standard height for their age group. But more important, it's this hidden hunger I've spoken about, where the brain is also dwarfed because of shortage of micronutrients. So my upbringing, that's what I remember when I was at school. It was those meal times that I really looked forward to.
I think we should probably move on to question and answer from the audience.
Round of applause for Dr. Sibanda. So I'm gonna run around and give a mic to for questions. Does anybody have a question? Want to start? And please introduce, say your name and grade.
I'm Katie. I'm in 11th grade. And you talked about the failure website and you joked about your own failures, but what are some milestones, successes or failures for you that mattered a lot to where you are today?
I think I'll take 2 or 3, then that way we make more. Yeah.
Celine, she's going to take 2 or 3 questions, write them down and answer them all.
So I'm Roman and I'm a junior. I was wondering, like, in your opinion, do you think that a plant-based diet, instead of raising animals for meat, is more sustainable economically?
One more question?
So you talked about this climate, my name is Zeta and I'm a junior as well. You talked about this climate smart agriculture, but it's one thing for us to mandate that, say, ConAgra here in the United States has like this amount of renewable resources and these like safe pesticides, but how do we get that access and get poor farmers to be able to be sustainable?
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Tough questions. What milestones have I set and not achieved? Maybe I'll go that way. I can see you smile. So I can't swim, and every year I say to myself, this is the year I'm going to make it happen. And I think I've had 10 formal training sessions. I remember when I completed my PhD, my supervisor said, well, we're ready for the examination. Can you go somewhere and do something you've never done? Of course I've done it. I had done it before, and I said, this is the time I'll learn to swim. And you know what? I can do a whole length under training, and the moment I stop training, I forget. So then the other thing I really regret is not writing. And I've made a public commitment, and maybe let me make it now, so that I do deliver, that I have to publish 2 books this year. So I hope it will happen. I've got all these tattered pieces of paper all over of books I'm writing. I think I'm up to 10 now, but none of them ever see the publication house. So this year I've got to get 2 out. So that will be a compilation of the talks I've been giving. So someone's promised to help me with that. And another one I'm writing about, better not say. That will be exciting reading. It's more about my upbringing, and it's written to young people, the things I regret not telling my children when they were growing up. So look out for that one. Now, milestones in terms of my own profession. I would really love a situation whereby when we elect our leaders, we are clear what they are understanding, knowledge base, who advises them. I come from a continent where, particularly for girls, particularly for women, we don't get a platform to engage with leadership and tell them the real issues that affect us. We had a time where we had 2 women presidents. That was Sirleaf Johnson for Liberia and Malawi, short-lived. And we could see the changing environment where people were opening up to relate to fundamental issues that affect women. We are all equal human beings, but we believe that, particularly for us in agriculture, women are the backbone of the African agriculture economy, and yet they are so changed even on fundamental issues relating to nutrition of women, fundamental issues relating to health, and why should it be so? So we would like to see leadership that understands the issues and is accountable, and I think that's where we failed as a continent. Going to
I think we have to finish that one.
On plant-based, we have a population of 7 billion now. 1 billion people on this continent own farm livestock, are farmers involved in livestock. Now, if you put that in a smallholder sense, you're saying that's the only source of protein they have for feeding their families. Would you really want to deprive them, or would you want to equip them with technologies that makes them farm in a sustainable way? So I'm combining that with the next question. So what we would need is research that allows these smallholder farm families who depend on those farm chickens, the goats, the sheep, and the cattle and the milk to be able to farm in a responsible way. And we cannot blanket a farming of livestock that's done in a closed environment as compared to outdoor, where these animals are fertilizing the environment, where they are giving back to the environment, and all we need to do is to make sure that the humans who are looking up to this species for food, for income, for manpower in terms of traction for their farms are doing it in a responsible way. So we need to research to make sure that that's sustainable farming and that they can benefit in all ways from this species. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I actually had one, and I thought it'd be fitting considering we have Mayor Strumlin here, who's a policymaker. So through my research, I found that you would like to be sharing with policymakers in Maine one strategy used by the Food, Agricultural, Natural Resource Policy Analysis Network in Africa to best provide assistance to households according to their needs. Can you please speak on what that means?
Oh, that's a big one. I think when we're talking about assets, for us in farming, we're talking about the human asset, the social networks where you get knowledge and support from. You're talking about the natural assets, which is your land, your water supplies. You're talking about physical assets. Do you have the tools for farming? And then you're talking of financial assets, because half the time you depend on the market, you need to buy inputs. So what we've done as a network is to go into develop a database for about 30,000 households in 7 countries, where we've been measuring over the past 10 years the asset base. And it's amazing how, when you categorize the findings, you have 3 distinct categories. You've got households that are coping and can go through a drought and still survive because they've built this asset base. And on average, it's about 10% in every country, between 7 and 10%. Then you've got the middle group, which is 60 to 70%, who are sitting on the table but are about to fall. Any little shift like this current drought means they will fall off the table unless government or some help comes in just to provide that prop and support so that they hang in there for the next season. Then you have the last group, which is the welfare cases. These are households which are either child-led, or there is a widow, or they are old people in their 90s who are looking over 4, 5, 8, 10 orphaned grandchildren. So it means in terms of production, that household will struggle to get out of poverty. They will need intensive care in terms of free education for the children, free food baskets, so that they stay alive. And that's the welfare category, which is usually about 3-5% in any community. Unfortunately, when government interventions come, we tend to blanket the cases and have one size fits all. If it's food aid, we say line up, collect food, that's what you need. And yet, you need an education maybe to lift that household that's labeled welfare for now, but if those children got education, they will be better off, they'll get better jobs, and they'll be able to support their grandparents. So what we've been trying to promote is targeted support that looks at the asset base and tailors the interventions to the accurate needs of the household.
Thank you very much. And yeah.
Thank you very much. Just another round of applause for our wonderful student moderators. For our very special guest, Dr. Sibanda, and I'd like to introduce our city leader, our Mayor Strimling, who's in charge of the assets of our community. And you have in front of you many assets and future leaders among us. So thank you, Mayor Strimling, for being here, and welcome to Durham High School.
For having me, and not only future leaders, obviously current leaders. Appreciate all you do, and thank you very much. I'm concerned that if a website were created of my failures, there would not be enough bandwidth, but I love the idea, and actually I think I might go home and try to write them down, because I think that would be very helpful as a reminder to all of us. I'd like to today present you with a key to the city. I'll have you know this is the first key I've presented as the mayor. I've been mayor now for 3 months, but you're arriving here as such a distinguished guest. I'm honored that you are the first one to receive it, so thank you for being here.
We'd like to give you a little token of Deering's appreciation. Very cool, insulated Deering water cup. Thank you